Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today I'm going to be talking with you about the female invasion. First, women wanted equal pay and opportunities. Nothing wrong with that if they can actually do the same work that men do. Then they wanted affirmative action. They wanted to be promoted in the workplace to balance out how they have been marginalized. I guess that's only fair too, since they had been marginalized for some time. But then they keep wanting more and more and more equity until it goes way beyond equality. Feminists push for more and more opportunities for women. They pushed for more social programs and more funding, more scholarships, more university positions, more charities. Then they started pushing for equal outcomes. They didn't just want equal opportunities, but they wanted big corporations to have to hire 50% women. And feminists started pushing for women to become 50% of all other desired fields as well. Not all jobs, but just the best jobs, the cushiest positions that pay the best and are the most esteemed and admired. Things like science and technology and high-level business positions and being career politicians, and leaving women out of the worst positions such as hard labor, mining, sanitation, etc. And continuing to lie about the wage gap when women continue to accept lower paid positions over higher paid ones and work less than men, but they continue to push for themselves to get paid more and be given more opportunities and promotions and also get more help from men in the workplace that they can then take credit for. This equity of equal outcome has gone so far as to make it so that with all the affirmative action and scholarships for women in university, women are now enrolling in and graduating from university at greater numbers than men, and women get exponentially more scholarships and are now having this student loan forgiveness program that is going to mostly benefit women for the poor degree choices that they made. So even though women have achieved more than equality, but have greater equity than men do, they are still getting affirmative action and promotions in education and work. And women are now pushing us men out of the workforce, and in some cases, underpricing us and creating a financial and unemployment crisis. They got affirmative action because they were a marginalized class once upon a time, but now they have turned the tables on us and turned men into the marginalized class. And yet, they're still getting affirmative action for being a marginalized class decades ago, even though they aren't anymore. Because they can continue to lie about how oppressed they are and how the toxic male privilege that no longer exists for men who are now the oppressed class is somehow still oppressing women. And so they still need feminism to help liberate them from the patriarchy. Yeah. And as if taking our jobs and our places in university wasn't enough, women who couldn't use their university diplomas are now having male taxpayers pay that back. And oftentimes they are useless degrees in things like liberal arts and gender studies that can then only really be used for women to become professors at the university and teach more arbitrary subjects like gender studies, which is, a complete misnomer since it really is just feminism and propaganda. But that's not all, because even though women have already won, that wasn't enough. They have to go beyond taking over the workplace and education, and they now want to invade all male spaces. Though this isn't actually a new trend, every space where men congregate has been invaded by women throughout the years. The pubs and cafes, men's groups, which even one had a feminist dress up like a man to infiltrate it, to try to expose some big male conspiracy, and prove that feminism is right about toxic masculinity or something, and then realizing that men weren't toxic and overprivileged and the whole thing blew up in her face. And then, of course, there was Gamergate. Even the online gaming community has suffered greatly from the female invasion. Women want to invade all male spaces in order to take them over, just like an enemy army. And they go about it with political campaigns. First, they complain that it is sexist because there is no women allowed there. Then they gain entry and begin their infiltration. Then they say that the space is still sexist and needs to be a safe space for women. Then they start to control the way that men speak in this space so that it feels like a safe space for women and censor any man's language that says something that they do not like. Then they seek to begin to influence the men there in other ways, to try to adopt more of their messaging and say more of the things that they like, and not only talk like them, but act like them as well, and influence them to act and behave in the ways that they want. And then they begin to recruit other women and form social connections and increase in numbers and form a network. Then they seek leadership positions. And after that, they marginalize men and even begin to kick them out of the community that was originally supposed to be a safe space for men, but then suddenly became all about catering to and empowering women, and then they just take over after that. This is happening across most of the business world and many other communities and organizations. Men's groups that are supposed to be support groups for men, to support one another in a safe space where women cannot emasculate them, aren't even safe. Even the Boy Scouts have been infiltrated by girls, even though there are Girl Scouts. But if girls want to be in Boy Scouts, they get to be, because otherwise they can start complaining about sexism. Girls do, however, get to retain all their own female safe spaces, and keep them separate from men, however. So don't be fooled. This is, in fact, an invasion. It may happen in different ways and at different rates and in different places, but it is a large-scale invasion. And men have to be ready to rebel and not allow female invaders to stifle them, to find their voices and speak out against them when they try to infiltrate our safe spaces and change us, because that is the exact reason they are doing it. They don't want men to be able to have places where they can be alone amongst men and free to be as masculine as we want to be and speak our minds. You see, when they are alone with other women, the worst of themselves comes out. They end up getting extremely narcissistic together, pinging off of one another, acting as toxic as they want to, talking shit about everyone that they see as inferior, and especially the men in their lives, and doing all sorts of man-hating, as well as scheming and conspiring together with their social manipulation tactics on how they are going to subjugate the men in their lives, and go on feminist rants and talk about how they can empower themselves and achieve their full narcissistic potential. And last but not least, they share their secrets that they have lied to their men about, such as cheating. And they may even, engage in cheating together. They may even go out, drinking for one of their girls' nights together and watch each other hooking up with guys, even though some of them are in relationships, right? And they have to keep each other's secrets because women live by a certain sisterhood code together. And take it from me, because I used to be a nightclub promoter, so I've seen enough girls' nights out to know exactly how they go and just how bad women behave when they have their girls' nights out and the types of bad things that they do together. However, men's nights out are not as bad as women think. Women are assuming that men, when left alone, act the same way as them, and that is why they feel the need to invade male spaces and take them over so that they can supervise and censor us. It can happen in any context and on any level. Bars and cafes all used to be male spaces. In ancient times, women campaigned against them. They had even been outlawed in the past. But nowadays, women have infiltrated them and made them to cater to them. Cafes and bars sell more drinks that are made to suit women's tastes than men's these days. And bars even have ladies' nights where they will charge women less, something that is supposed to be against the law. It's supposed to be considered, sexism that goes against the Civil Rights Act. But I guess when it benefits women, no one in the Justice Department cares. And of course, in marriage, the women expect men to buy them a house so that she can invade it and decorate all of the main spaces in it, right? And be in control of the primary space and relegate the man to the garage or the basement or the tool shed or a man cave or maybe the attic. And the man has to get the wife's permission if he wants to put up any decoration in his own home. And the answer is usually going to be no if it's in one of the primary spaces. She says, you have your own space, right? Off on the sidelines of the house. And we're seeing a serious upsurge of women in politics as well, who are not only changing the laws in their favor, but bringing feminist politics in and censoring men by accusing them of mansplaining. It's gotten to the point where a man is going to have to take up smoking cigars in order to be able to gather in a man's only space, since most women cannot stand the smell of cigar smoke. But then again, some men can't either. And there are, of course, women out there who do enjoy a good cigar. And women can even, of course, invade the cigar lounges and such and try to turn them into vaping lounges, which has happened in some smoke shops. They traditionally were more geared towards cigars and pipe tobacco, and a lot of them these days don't sell that stuff anymore and have switched to vapes. And who do you think all of those sweet flavors are for, primarily? So you see, even where there may be exceptions for men where we could have a space free of women, There are also exceptions among women, and there will still be some who might want to partake of that space. And all it takes is a female or two for it to stop being a safe space for men where you can fully express yourself and speak your mind. And these are just the social issues. Women are even more interested in invading male-dominated business fields, the ones that are prestigious, that is. And once they invade your company, things start to change professionally in many other negative ways. The same social restrictions that I already talked about will apply, and you'll have to deal with their manipulations and dominance of the workplace socially, while also being forced to give them a leg up professionally. You see, since they are pushing out half of the men who work there based upon merit and demand that they get hired based on their gender, they aren't as good of workers as the men they pushed out. And they end up needing help from other male employees who have to take time and energy away from their work to help the woman, who then get full credit for the work, while the employer looks at the man and wonders why he suddenly is taking longer to finish his own work. Back when I was a sex educator, I had a podcast called The Sexuality Show. When I got it started, after booking up a bunch of male sex educators and related teachers who I was affiliated with or knew of and admired, I realized that if I was booking up all male speakers, I might seem sexist and misogynistic, which is not a good look for a male sex educator. I didn't want to have feminists campaigning against me, did I? So I made an effort to try to start booking female sex educators and try to make it 50-50. However, I soon found out that female sex educators who were doing the same level of work as the males were near impossible to find. I could not find 50% female sex educators who were good enough speakers to be on my show. And even taking the time and energy to search for them and do the headhunting put myself in an ergonomic deficit. I had to spend so much time trying to find them and reach them and corresponding with them. And then I had to interview them to see if they were a good fit for the show. And most of them weren't, because most of them weren't very good at answering questions academically and simply weren't very good speakers and didn't really seem to have much good information to teach. But what's more is that they almost always missed their meetings. They wouldn't show up to the interview, or even if they made it through the interview and got the show, they often then wouldn't show up for it. Best case scenario, they'd try to reschedule at the last minute. They wouldn't even have good excuses. They were just being flaky. Usually they wouldn't even give any excuse. And even one of the women who was supposed to be one of the most professional and most successful sex educators I talked to literally admitted to double booking me. Like, what are you, a teenager having your first job? You don't know how to work a schedule? I literally haven't been told that I've been double booked since I was probably in my early 20s. And this woman was older than me. But then what happened with the ones that actually did the show was that they required generally far more coaching and editing than the men did, right? The men generally didn't need any coaching and far less editing. Now, I tried to keep my show down to about an hour to an hour and a half tops, but some of these women would be so bad at speaking and teaching that they were having to repeat themselves multiple times whenever they said something, and it ended up taking hours to record something that was supposed to take about 1 hour. One woman literally took 5 hours to deliver a show that should have been less than 2 hours tops. And so editing these women to produce a finished show was a huge job that took about a week of full-time work to do. And that same woman that took so long because she was such a poor speaker ended up even snapping at me, because even with all the work I was doing for her, which was a free promotion of her business, she was actually extremely narcissistic and constantly going on these ego trips with me whenever we had to communicate about the project. She didn't seem to understand that it was my full-time job that week to work on a free promotion for her, and that she had made it harder for me than anyone ever had, and somehow demanded to be treated like a queen or something. And with the workload I was doing for her, I simply didn't have time for all that, and I had been polite for a while, but apparently too polite. And I had to put my foot down. So I told her I didn't have the time and that she needed to leave her ego at the door, and that was all it took for her to flip out on me and then ghost me. And this woman was someone who professionally did relationship counseling and was coming onto my show to discuss relationships from a sort of academic sociological standpoint. Someone who is older and more accomplished than me professionally, who makes her living giving relationship advice on things such as communication. And yet dealing with her was like dealing with a teenage girl with this overly entitled narcissistic princess complex. And so she did not communicate like someone who even knew what it meant to communicate constructively. So she never demonstrated the types of adult communication skills that she taught about. She did not practice what she preached. Then there was another woman who also gave relationship advice, but this one did so more from a spiritual perspective. And so her thing was that she taught about the law of attraction and had written a workbook on how to find your, quote, soulmate. even though she had never done so herself and was currently single, and though she was in her late 30s and had a serious lack of love life and prospects and even the most basic social and relationship skills such as communication, again, which she just couldn't do very well professionally or socially, which is probably why she was single and probably unable to admit to herself that the reason for it had more to do with her social psychology than it did some sort of spiritual theory about predestination and the law of attraction. So she tricks herself with this sort of fantastic thinking, like, if I just figure out some sort of metaphysical law of attraction formula, I will be able to use it to attract my soulmate, just like in The Secret. And I know for sure it will work, because it is when you believe in something that it does work. So you can know that it's going to work, because if you believe it, it is going to. It's like a vicious circle, right? And it's basically neurosis that is demonstrative of potential mental illness, or possibly like a retard level IQ. At least I would like to think that this comes from some sort of mental disability or handicap, because if not, then what she's doing is what I would call fraud. I mean, writing a workbook about how to find your soulmate when you don't have any relationships to show for it at all. I mean, that is basically like lying and tricking other people. But that is just a level of professional ethics that women have, right? That is not an isolated incident. That is just another one of many examples. So when it came to their level of professionalism, having a professional attitude and such, and behaving in a respectable, responsible, professional manner, showing professional integrity, etc., women were much worse than men were. I had women who were extremely narcissistic, even though their credentials seemed questionable at best, bogus at worst, potentially. Like, two women in particular seemed to have nonsense degrees and couldn't even spell or pronounce words right. And then would get cross with me for correcting their spelling. But I told them, like, if you're going to be presenting on my show, you have to be pronouncing words right. You have to be using proper spelling and grammar and using language correctly. Like, that is literally the first thing someone should be able to do when talking about a topic, is to spell the key words of that topic correctly. And use them in a sentence properly. But they somehow found this contestable, though, in spite of believing in education and academia enough to invest in a degree program. But it seemed like professional roles to women are more about narcissism and affirmative action rather than actual professional standards. They don't expect to need to have to prove themselves through performance. They feel as though titles and having, the degree should be enough. And they don't like to be questioned too much, or debated, or given constructive criticism, or, for instance, recorded so that things they say can get played back repeatedly, and they have to answer for what they said if it is not true. They also don't like being fact-checked or having to provide evidence for their claims, or even back things up by showing how they practice what they preach, because they generally don't, and they don't want to have to lead by example. They just want to be given leadership roles without even having to work as hard for them as men work for theirs. Professionalism is really just an empty front for women. It's not a code of ethics as it is for men. Women get to where they want to be in the professional world through affirmative action and what is essentially like reverse sexism, and piggybacking off of the work of men, and Machiavellian manipulation, and piggybacking off of the work of men, at least the men who are left in the workplace, because they also seek to take men's jobs and push many of us out, which is exactly what happened to most male sex educators like me on most social media platforms and a lot of the vehicles that we used in order to get ourselves and our information and content out there. And unfortunately, it cost me my career as a sex educator, even after producing sound academic content, because I was speaking freely about sexuality and things such as gender, masculinity, and femininity, feminism, and having sex, and I was doing so in a way that was uncensored. Well, my channels and content started getting demonetized, then censored, then deleted, then YouTube deleted my whole channel, and Facebook deleted whole profiles, and Vimeo deleted my channel as well. And the only sex educators who remain on those platforms are allowed to do so because they adopted the mainstream feminist narrative. This is what happens when we practice affirmative action in the workplace. We are giving up male jobs to women, allowing them to infiltrate our spaces based not off of merit, but reverse sexism, which is just another form of sexism. And then they take our spaces and make it their own and marginalize us. It is an invasion, and it is time we stood up to them and formed a unified front of men to stop it. If we do not keep male spaces male and safe for us men, women bring tyranny in with them. They not only dominate these spaces, but use them as their own vehicles for the manipulation of men. They will play people off of each other and create workplace cliques and rivalries. They will involve their sexuality and flirt with men to get what they want, and then find men to date and leech off of longer term as well. They will also complain to anyone who will listen about the people that they do not like. And if that is not enough, they will even go as far as to file false harassment allegations. They may even do this with someone that they have flirted with and given signals to, which may have just been bait. They will throw people under the bus to get ahead. You see, women are more conniving than men are when it comes to success, and they use Machiavellian tricks and sociopathic tactics to do so. So you need to watch out for female invaders and treat them with great caution. Keep a sense of suspicious awareness about you towards all female behavior. Never allow yourself to be alone with them, because they can accuse you of harassment and it will be your word against theirs, and the employer will have to believe them in order to be politically correct about it. And especially never allow yourself to be partnered with them on a work project, because it is not going to be an equal dynamic. All right, you're not going to get full credit for work that you did, and it's just going to be an advantageous position for her and a disadvantageous position for you. Women are great at social manipulation and leveraging others for their benefits, and they do rely upon using men for their social utility. So be careful. Don't let yourself get caught in a situation where you are letting a woman infiltrate your social or professional circles and begin to manipulate you. And if a woman you work with needs help with something, don't help her. She's getting paid to do it, and you are not getting paid to do her work. If she can't do her job, she shouldn't be there getting paid to do it. Focus on doing your job and succeeding in your career, because women aren't going to help you when you need it. They are only going to hold you back. The more time you spend helping a woman do her job, the less you are doing yours, and the more you are then jeopardizing it. You are literally helping her get ahead while you fall behind. So don't help them. Don't work with them. Don't even let yourself be alone with them. If they try to invade your space and push you out, push back. Resist the feminine takeover. That concludes this talk. Thanks for listening. Be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things too. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine personal development and living the life you want to as an independent man. And stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be on the matriarchy. And make sure you're subscribed so you'll be notified when that is. And until then, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.